What's up, fellow X-Men? Professor J here. Today, we are going to take a look at anger, particularly from the perspective of what occurred in the Mike Van Wyck and Jeff Nippard video. So, needless to say, we don't need to pass judgment here because what we saw was not right and very inappropriate. So, today, we're going to take a look at some quick tips on how you can better manage your anger so something like that doesn't occur in the future for you. If you're interested in that or any other mental skills, take a look at some of our past videos. But for now, let's get to it. First off, let's try and understand this conceptually. Let's talk about something called core beliefs. Core beliefs are deep-seated assumptions about ourselves, others, and the world generally around us. Now, core beliefs are typically unconscious, but they shape our thoughts and feelings and can especially occur in moments of anger. Now, generally speaking, core beliefs come in three flavors, that is, helpless, worthless, and unlovable. Now, I'm not here to comment on any particular core beliefs that I believe another person has, so I'm just going to pick one and we're going to work with that. So why don't we work with the core belief of worthless? So how could this core belief possibly get shaped in an individual as they develop? A core belief of worthlessness is generally going to come from a pattern of repeated experiences throughout a person's life where they are made to feel worthless. So if they grew up in a household and nothing they did was ever good enough, and they continued to see that pattern throughout childhood and adolescence, into late adolescence and early adulthood, they may begin to ingrain the belief that they are worthless. And this can manifest in other situations throughout their life, even when they leave the home. So let's say when someone feels, disrespected by a follow-up post from another individual, this core belief of worthlessness may be sort of activated, and the surrounding thoughts and behaviors around that core belief trend in a maladaptive direction. Now, with this core belief fully activated, this person may act impulsively. They may fall back on patterns that have previously worked in situations that are similar to the situation in which the core belief is engaged and they acted upon it. Now, when that sort of core belief is triggered, you have an accompanying set of thoughts and feelings that are associated with it, and a lot of those thoughts and feelings are negative. So, it is our job, once we have identified said core belief, to then begin addressing the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are associated with it so that we can break patterns of maladaptive behavior. Again, taking a step back, this isn't me saying that Mike has any particular core belief. This is just an example for us to go off of. So again, core belief, worthless. Let's look at the thoughts and feelings. So when you think about something like anger, it often starts with thoughts that we might not even be able to identify, but it could start with a thought like, that person disrespected me. And given the situation, I think that's a pretty credible thought to have. Mike posts a video. Jeff has a response to said video. No one ever really says the other person's name, but it's sort of implied in the videos who each one of them is talking about. So in that scenario, to me, it's at least pretty likely that someone felt disrespected. Now, when someone feels disrespected, this emotional response triggers a fight or flight response from your amygdala, and this is going to work to increase your heart rate, increase muscle tension, increase respiration, and pushes towards reactive behaviors. Now, a couple more things to add to this scenario is before the incident at the gym, there was a sort of tit-for-tat conversation where Mike shits on science, and then a response video from Jeff. So there is time before this incident occurs. What could happen during that time? So for me, whenever I think about something like that, this is just my best guess, is that someone, Mike in this instance, could have been ruminating on the response from Jeff. Now, with rumination are just thoughts. These thoughts can lead to particular feelings, and if you continue on this pattern, thinking thoughts of like, this dude disrespected me, or I don't like what he said, or any number of things, and you continue to sort of ruminate and build up these feelings, this can also amplify what you feel once getting into the scenario of encountering this person at the gym. Another thing to add on top of it is like the workability of this behavior. Why do we want to look at workability? Well, workability sort of takes out the judgment labels in this particular situation. Now, I think we all know that what happened was completely inappropriate. However, whenever you want someone to change their behavior, if you were to take out sort of the moral labels like the good, bad judgment and just shift it to like, is that action workable or unworkable? That way, I believe, leads to someone who is more willing to change their behavior. So in the scenario, throat slapping somebody, definitely unworkable. And another thing you want to take into account is history. So Mike was Drake's bodyguard for a number of years, and in those scenarios, I'm sure he had to push and slap and move a lot of people out of Drake's way. So that is not to excuse anything that he did, but that is to say that this may be a learned behavior. He may have learned that violence gets you what you want, and in some ways, you get rewarded for violence. It is just in this scenario, in this setting, where he is a trainer, where he's a social media figure, those types of behaviors are not adaptive. So I just wanted to highlight those things because these are some ways we can address some of these behaviors from sort of a long-term perspective and not an acute perspective. However, we are here to see what we can do about these behaviors in the moment. So let's move on to a few of the tips that I have for dealing with anger in the moment. So number one, we shift into autopilot a lot, and we don't actually identify the thoughts that we are having that are leading to the feelings, which are leading to behaviors that may be maladaptive. By noticing and naming your feelings, you actually take a step back from those thoughts and feelings, and you give yourself space to work. Let's say we identified the thought, I feel disrespected. You can take a deep breath and then gauge your response to that thought in a more measured manner than just allowing that to run in the background of your mind. Now, after you've taken that deep breath, we are going to move on to tip 2. This isn't the only tip or the only thing you could do, but it's a fun one, and I often have my clients do it. So tip number 2 is to then say your thought in a silly voice. And I think it is really cool that Dr. Mike over at RP kind of automatically does this. So saying your thoughts in a silly voice is an old acceptance and commitment therapy skill. It's one of the classics at this point, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And when Dr. Mike does it, I believe he calls it the 50s kid voice. And so it's something like, oh boy, that handsome Canadian man sure did demolish me intellectually. I feel so angry. Oh boy, that handsome Canadian man sure did disrespect me. So saying it in a silly voice is tip number 2. Tip number 1, notice a name. Tip number 2, say your thought in a silly voice. Why do we want to do this? I think a lot of the issues with thoughts is that we begin to take them too seriously. We don't consider that our mind often offers us thoughts that are completely out of our control. And to highlight this, I'm going to ask you all to not think about a pink elephant. Don't think about a pink elephant. Don't think about its big pink ears. Don't think about its tail. Don't think about its feet. Now, you would be hard-pressed to convince me that you weren't in some ways thinking about some aspect of a pink elephant. So that example is just to highlight that we often don't have control over the thoughts that come up in our heads, especially factoring in things like core beliefs. Situations that seem similar to situations from our past may trigger certain thoughts like, I feel disrespected, I feel angry, I feel so upset. It might trigger these feelings along with some thoughts that come along with those feelings, and then that might lead to behaviors that aren't going to be so great. So backing up, back to saying these thoughts in a silly voice, that allows us to, 1, not take our thoughts too seriously, and 2, create even more distance between us and those thoughts. From there, tip number 3, which actually could be tip number 1, is change your environment. So this is going to work in terms of any of your fitness goals, any of your dieting goals, and now especially in any of your interpersonal goals where you don't want to end up assaulting someone. So why would we change our environment? Well, you want to look to change your environment before you change yourself. If you were to experience anger towards somebody, the most powerful thing you could do isn't to craft some argument or to go and attack them. It is to walk away. It is to change your environment. So similar to like dieting, the thing you want to do first to set yourself up for a good diet is to get rid of any problematic foods that you have. The first thing that you want to do if you want to ingrain the habit of working out more is to set up your environment by either getting a gym membership and then setting out your clothes, or packing your clothes for the next day. Jumping back to meals, you can prep all of your meals for the next 3 days or the next week. You want to set up the environment so that you are successful. If we are talking about interpersonal interactions and we are in an environment that may have triggered us, the best thing we can do for ourselves is to leave the environment. Now, if you're training in a gym alongside of someone who is triggering to you in some way, it's probably a big gym. Go train on the other side of the gym. Don't walk around that person. Walk over here. And if you feel like you need to have a communication with this person, perhaps give it a little bit more time than within a week of a post and then a response on an internet so that you can gather yourself to have actually something to say. Tip number 4, and the last tip, once you have gained your distance, number 1 from your thoughts, number 2 from the situation, you want to fall back on things like relaxation techniques. Now, this is where you can start to train your attention, and that's a lot of what this is more often than not, we're not paying attention to the thoughts that pop up and how those lead to feelings and how those lead to behaviors. So after you have noticed and named your thoughts in a silly voice, gotten some distance from those, changed your environment, now you want to practice focusing and training your attention with some relaxation techniques I highly recommend doing some mindfulness and some deep breathing, and you should check out some of our other episodes on mindfulness and deep breathing and how you can apply that, and then combine all those things together so that you can begin moving in a direction that is more adaptive, more workable for the environment, and move in a direction that doesn't make you appear to be a bad guy. Alrighty, folks, that is it for this episode. Just as a reminder, none of this is a replacement for therapy. I'm a therapist. I'm not your therapist. However, I believe some of these skills can be used in the real world outside of a therapeutic setting, and it can help us to function and exist as happy and healthy human beings. I also want to highlight anger is a natural emotion, that we all feel, and we all have to learn how to manage it. And for some individuals, it's going to be harder because maybe they've encountered things throughout their life that has made it difficult to develop adaptive coping strategies. So for anyone who has identified that they may have a maladaptive coping strategy, I hope this episode helps. And if you take a look at some of my other episodes around sort of mindfulness, deep breathing, other relaxation skills, maybe you can take something that can help you learn to identify these things, make room for these things, and head in a direction that's more aligned with your values and less aligned with impulsivity. So if you all like this episode, give me a like, share it with somebody else, and if you're interested in more, the next episode will be on another mental skill that I think you all will enjoy. See you there.